I listened to Lydia Thorpe's full press club speech, actually. There are some concerns she had about how, how it might affect the rights of Aboriginal people. What response can we give to people that use that as an excuse or no? Like, what's the response to the, what do they call it? The progressive no?
Can I have first go at that? So, and this is where I might be, so one of the things you need to know about me is I'm incredibly pragmatic, and I do know Lydia very well, and I respect her, but I have also had the conversation with her that you cannot let the search for perfection stop you from getting a good outcome.
So as an Indigenous person, First Nations and New Zealander, in relationship with lots of First Nations peoples across the world, I do understand there's aspiration for treaty. So I tend to respond like, I think treaty is, for Indigenous peoples, is often expressed as the ultimate expression of self-determination. But if we notice, the Labor government is committed to implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full, which is voice, treaty and truth. So treaty is definitely on the table, but voice is first, and these wishes come from First Nations peoples themselves.
Shireen?
Yeah, just to add, there's no progressive no.
Actually, I love that. There is no progressive no.
I know that this is what some people say. There's no progressive no, and there's just no. This is what we have to say yes or no to, this amendment, right? Now, if the Australian polity can't bring itself to recognise Indigenous people in the Constitution, from which they've been excluded, and give them an advisory voice in their affairs, if we can't do that, do you really think we're going to get ourselves politically over the line for something more ambitious, like Lydia's for treaties and all this other stuff?
Self-determination.
Bob Hawke promised a treaty. He couldn't get the political will behind him. It never happened. So if we say no to this, I don't think there's going to be anything much on the table for Indigenous people, is the reality. And in terms of fears that this would be somehow detrimental to Indigenous people, I just disagree. So as a constitutional lawyer, I just disagree. Like, how? So currently, our constitution says racial discrimination is allowed. That's basically what it says. It gives government a special power, race power. We're the only constitution that I'm aware of that does that. It's presided over discriminatory laws. I'm talking about laws denying Indigenous people the vote in some jurisdictions right up until the 60s. Equal voting rights across the board wasn't achieved until 1983. Policies denying the payment of equal wages, policies splitting families apart, forcibly removing children, banning languages from being spoken, controlling where they can live, who they can marry. That was all enabled by the current top-down powers relationship set up under our constitution. This is correcting that a little bit by at least guaranteeing that Indigenous people will have a voice when those decisions are made. It doesn't flip the relationship like maybe Lydia Thorpe wants it, a veto, or maybe she wants to chuck out the constitution altogether, but it creates a fairer power relationship. So how can that be detrimental? I just can't see how it could be detrimental. The objection of Lydia and others at the Uluru Convention was, we don't want to be recognised in your illegal constitution, right? There's a very philosophical, separatist stance, and it represented the minority there, and it still represents the minority. The pragmatic majority of Indigenous Australians have said, we want to be recognised. We want a guaranteed voice in our affairs. So that's how, remember, there's objections on the far left. Lydia Thorpe's objections are coming from the far left. They say this is not enough. But then you've got the equivalent objections further to the right who say, oh, this is too much. This is too radical. So what does that tell you? It tells you that this is a middle ground, pragmatic, sensible proposal. It's profound, but it's modest, and it's an important step forward. And importantly, it's what the majority of Indigenous people have asked for. So I think it's a shame that the fringes are sometimes given equal weight in our political discourse, because it makes us think, oh, there's more. But it's not. They are the fringes. Over 80% of Indigenous people want this. And we just need to decide yes or no. Are we going to give them this, or are we going to say no?